Hey, I completed the DBT Analytics Engineering certification a few days ago, and I just wanted to share you what I think you should know if you want to successfully complete it. So first of all, the environment. It's a standard proctored environment, and you don't need to install any additional software on your computer. So it goes through the browser. Once you sign up for the certification, you will receive a link through which you will be able to do a tech check if you can share your camera, share your microphone, share your screen, and so on. Now, one caveat that I encountered here is that during the tech test, my screen sharing didn't work, and I tried it in different browsers, then on another laptop, and it just didn't work. So I was a bit anxious when I entered the actual exam, but on the exam, screen sharing is just worked. So probably that's a bug on their side. If you run into it, don't panic. You are in chat contact with the proctor, so you can't see them, you can't talk with them, which on a personal note I found better in earlier exams. So I love if I see someone I spent 2 hours together, but here is like a very formal, to the point chat interface that you receive. You will need to arrive with a clean table, and you will need to move your camera around. So if you have a desktop PC with a camera, then expect that you will need to unmount your camera and just show your table around. Your table must be completely clear, so no notes, no pen, no paper. Your phones, headphones, whatsoever will need to be put at least 2 meters away from your table. The environment is okay. It's a bunch of questions that you need to go through. You have a timer, so you will always know how much time you have left, and you have 2 hours for 65 questions, right? I found that 2 hours is a generous time. I completed the certification in maybe 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I was very, very considerate. So I read every question at least twice, and also flagged a few questions, which means, and this is what you can also do, you can just go and flag a question and then come back to it later. So 2 hours is great. DBTers might make you answer ungraded research questions, but you don't know which those are, so I think this information is not too relevant. How hard is the exam? It is hard. I scored 76%, and obviously I have a course on DBT and participated in a bunch of DBT projects. So to me, that says that it is hard, and there are many, many reports from DBT practitioners with 1-2 years of experience. They fail at the first go. So if you fail for the first time, don't be disheartened, especially because the hardness of the exam is only partly about the content. The question formats are also somewhat tricky. There is one like super mean type of question, and you will see like I think like 3 to 4 of them in the exam. These are like DOMC questions, or discrete option multiple choice questions. That means that these questions are multiple choice, but you only see a single answer at a time. So you need to decide if his answer is correct or not, and then you go on. And eventually, they don't ask the rest of the questions, right? So maybe if you got it right at the first try, so like answer A was right, then you will be offered answer B, but not answer C and D. So the whole thing is a little bit confusing. And also the content is tricky. So one question I got with DOMC was that it was a screenshot of a bunch of canceled jobs in a DBT run or DBT build, or I didn't know if it was DBT build or run. Anyway, canceled jobs. What comes to your mind if you see canceled jobs in DBT? Is fail fast, right? So probably that's a fail fast execution. So one test failed and no other test was executed. But then I went through the first answer, the second answer, and the third answer, and Fairfax didn't come. But the third answer was something that I thought like, yeah, probably I just didn't try what the answer offers here, but it looks reasonable to have cancer jobs in this setting. So I just said yes, and then I was offered answer D, which was the fail fast option, right? But I probably already failed that question at the time. So that DOMC is tricky. Then there are also fill in the blanks questions. So for example, how do you define a DBT model, a Python model? And then you need to fill in that the function name must be model and the two parameters like DBT and session. And you need to type this out. Students also report hotspot questions when you need to click on an image, like on a DAG, like where does something happen? But I haven't encountered any of those. I encountered a bunch of image-based questions. That means that there was a DAG displayed and then there were questions about this tag. There are also multi-select questions, and I think some of those multi-select questions are easy to answer because sometimes it's like just associate with these materializations, with these use cases. And even though you can select the same materialization for the same use case, for example, in this example, all of the questions that I've seen were about like one-to-one mappings, right? So if you had like 4 materializations and then 4 things to put them in, then it was always a one-to-one mapping, no resampling. But there were also other multi-select questions where you just had to pick like which one is true. So an example could be like, what are the command line parameters for retry? What are the valid parameters for DBT retry? And then you have like 4 parameters and only 2 are valid. So those I found much harder. Another aspect why it's hard is that you probably use like 50% of DBT features, even if you work on intermediate use cases, but the test covers 90%. So there were a few things that I've also seen and checked and thought like, oh wow, okay, I heard about this thing, but I never used this in practice, and also never came to my mind to include it into my courses. Another thing is that some questions are ambiguous, I think unintentionally. So for example, something like, if you do a DBT clone and blah, 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 you have like a whole scenario, are new database objects created? And then I ask myself like, what is a database object? Certainly something will be created in the catalog. I think that's a database object, but maybe you think of like actual data produced, which is, for example, not happening in that scenario. So in this case, what helped me, and it occurred me to 2 occasions, is that I just flagged this question, and then as I moved on, after a while, based on other questions or other answer choices, it became clear how the certification, curriculum developer thought about the original question. So like flag those questions generously if you're unsure about the answer, because maybe the later questions will help you. Also, I had another occasion where it said like, what is something like, maybe I'm just making this up, but it was along the lines of, what is the best materialization if you want the results to be updated every time? And I was like, what means every time here? Query time or transformation time? So is it a view or is it a table? So I think you won't be able to avoid some of the questions where you just don't know what the certification developer thought of. Also, DBT is very good in, DBT Labs is very good in putting irrelevant info or like tricky info into the questions. So for example, it can happen that you have a full-on scenario with all the nitty-gritty details about how things work in a certain project, and then you have a question which actually doesn't really do anything with this scenario. So like you have a full-on scenario, and then the question is like, what does singular test do in this and that case, and you see like this and that case is just one line of the whole scenario, and you need to answer the question based on that, and all the other 10 information points are completely irrelevant. So prepare for those and have an eye for those. So ask yourself what is relevant and what is irrelevant for a question. Also, there were like tricky questions with pitfalls. So for example, let's say we talk like a half a page of scripts about how you run this project and what happens when you run a project with dbt run, but then the question is like, where is the SQL, the compiled SQL? Yeah, like this. Where is the compiled SQL in the project? And then you're like cognitively completely fit into like, we are working now about how we can run a project. So you would pick like in the run folder, but no, it's in the compiled folder because I asked about where the compiled file are, not like when where the actual SQL is when dbt executes. So just be very sharp and don't let dbt labs like trick you with these nasty questions. All right, topics. Just a few surprises here, but I think like nothing too surprising. Maybe the only surprising thing was like how specific and how advanced some of the questions were. But the topics that DBT Labs publishes, it is what you will find in the certification. I would suggest you to read up a lot on selectors, like the plus sign, the at sign, the modified selector, and all of these things. We had lots of questions about those. Also, Slim CI. I was surprised how overrepresented Slim CI is, like differ, modified, the target variable, manifest JSON, all these things you need to know about how to create and work with Slim CI. Also, best practices. So you can find a question, for example, that says, this is a pipeline where this specific model will be only used once. What is the best practice materialization? And then you will have like tricky answers, but you can spot that probably an ephemeral model is best practice here. But also like you can see some other deceiving candidates. So always keep in mind that what they ask. So if it's about best practice, then just ask for every answer like, is this best practice? Or the other one is best practice, because most of the answers they give you, they will be okay, but you will find one that stands out, but it will only stand out if you ask the exact question what DBT Labs asks you. So be very, very careful with those. We had lots and lots of questions on incremental strategies, materializations, and command line arguments, like how you can use a certain DBT command. And what caught me at a surprise is like all those questions about where internal files are. So for example, where is some information stored? Is it in manifest.json or in the run results.json in the target folder? So ensure that you have a good idea about how this target folder is structured. Now, how to nail the exam? You definitely want to go and work with DBT, not only complete the course. You want to suffer a little bit with more advanced techniques. So for example, be sure you implement a Slim CI yourself, and it shouldn't be Codex or Claude implementing it for you. It should be you like sweating it through, because then you will go into all of the dead ends that you will need to learn about in order to answer the question. So create an intermediate project, and I would suggest with as little AI guidance as possible. Also, as you work with this project, if you have error messages, maybe just ask yourself like, how would I debug this error message, and what gives away the error in the error message? Because there are many error outputs in the exam, and then you will need to tell like, what is your first guess? What would be what is the error most likely? And also, before you give it a shot, ensure that you go through a bunch of practice exams. There are many out of them on the internet. I mean, like practice exam prep, and go to Reddit and Medium and all these platforms, or just ask your resident AI agent to collect all the student feedback about how the certification goes. So, all in all, it is a hard certification. It certainly requires you to work with DBT, not only complete the course. But if you are sharp and you read every question very, very carefully, then it's definitely doable. So if you want to get certified, I would encourage you to do so. You got this.